Hi, this is Pete Lyons with Let's Play Salesforce. And in tonight's Einstein Analytics video, we're actually doing something completely different. There's no Einstein Analytics involved at all. We're going to be seeing for the first time on this channel, Tableau. And we're combining it with the power of Einstein Discovery through prediction services. So since I'm certainly not good enough with Python or any of this other stuff to do this on my own, we brought in a guest. Tomasz from Salesforce is going to show us how it works. So with no further ado, turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Pete. This is Tomasz. How's it going? I am a solutions engineer on the Einstein Analytics team. And today, what I mainly wanted to focus on was using Tableau, but using Einstein predictions within Tableau. So just as a quick background, with Einstein predictions, you have the ability to create models within the Einstein Discovery environment, but you can also expose predictions in external places. So any system, whether it's anything that's outside of CRM, including Tableau, you could expose those predictions out into a dashboard, for example. And the reason for that is because we have an API that's readily available for anyone to use to be able to send in some fields and get some predictions along with explanations and prescriptions back. So let me share my screen here. All right, and so just to give you all a little bit of background, some of this is eventually going to be available in the product. Safe harbor, no promises. They're working on stuff, but I can't tell you when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen exactly. But generally, we're working on a lot of different integrations between Tableau, the rest of Salesforce, and obviously Einstein Analytics itself. This connection between Einstein predictions and Tableau will eventually be natively available. But for now, you can actually leverage that API with some extra plumbing to get it to display on your Tableau dashboards. So again, safe harbor with all that stuff that I just said, but just keep that in mind. And we will go through a little bit through the architecture of how we can potentially do this right now today. So this dashboard that I've created within Tableau is all around HR analytics. We're looking at employee satisfaction scores across our entire organization. And what we're trying to do is look at different employees and predict their employee satisfaction along with factors that lead to those low satisfaction scores, and also potentially what we can do strategically to make sure that we get those higher employee satisfaction scores in our organization. So here we can look at things such as satisfaction scores by job function, by different regions in our business, by a granular table that really shows us all the different details of all of our employees along with their predicted scores, and then a histogram to really help us figure out which specific employees are really struggling with maybe their satisfaction right now, especially with the crazy pandemic that's going on. There's a lot of people that are affected by that, and we want to make sure that everyone's happy, right? But on the right also, you'll see an Einstein predictions panel, which is part of that built-in ability to start looking at those predictions we're getting from Einstein Discovery directly on that Tableau dashboard. And here, because I haven't clicked on anything yet, I'm currently looking at an overall employee satisfaction score to be predicted at 48, along with those top explanatory factors of all of my data that I've currently brought into Tableau. So we see that, because there's a lot of people that have been affected by COVID-19 and they haven't had their deductible met, that leads to a decrease in satisfaction. Obviously, the deductible met is based on a health insurance deductible. So obviously that could be a stressful situation for anyone right now. Also, we find that maybe the employee benefit of counseling isn't particularly working. So we see that's actually also reducing that employee satisfaction score. Or we see that the employee assistance employee benefit, on the other hand, is increasing the employee satisfaction score overall. So we're getting some kind of insight into what potentially is happening, what potentially we could do to make sure that more of our customers are satisfied right now. And again, we can look at the same type of explanations, but now in a prescription form, where maybe we see that changing job type to full-time for a lot of our contractors or part-time employees could potentially really raise this score as well. So just from a technical standpoint, what we've done here is we've actually scored all of our employees through the API. So I actually ran our whole employee set through what is called Tableau Prep Builder, which is Tableau's native ability to actually transform data in many different ways. Obviously you can do joins, you can call out external APIs, and that's exactly what we did here with an extension called TabPy, where you can write your own Python scripts or R scripts to call APIs or do some extra crazy calculations that you might want to include in your data sets. And then once we ran that flow, we've created a secondary data set with all the actual predictions, the explanations, and the top prescriptions, all within this Tableau dashboard. So just to get into it, I can easily start clicking around and faceting, right? So I can look at all my marketing folk who maybe are having a really tough time right now. We see that they do have a higher percentage of low employee satisfaction scores. I can also easily look at the Northeast because we do see that there is a little bit less satisfaction there than anywhere else. And obviously we see that this histogram is now showing me that we're focusing on some very, maybe the top 20 or bottom 25% of our employees when it comes to satisfaction. But what's great about Tableau is it's super interactive again. We can easily focus in on really that low satisfaction score overall. And now that I've faceted on this, I can again see obviously the score itself, which is 10, very low. And then we can see all those different factors that are leading to this. So we see, for example, that region being Northeast on its own is leading to a big drop in that satisfaction score. We also see that a lot of people in this specific facet that I've selected have a very low tenure. So maybe they're very new, they still haven't fully settled into their current job. And, with that whole crazy scenario that we keep talking about, it's leading to a little bit of anxiety for them, right? And so again, we can start looking at things that we can do for this specific segment of our population. We can give them the employee benefit of cost sharing or the employee benefit of employee assistance, which typically have been seen to really help this employee satisfaction score. We can also give them a full-time job type, right? Where maybe if they're a contractor or a part-time type of employee, they are less satisfied because again, maybe there's a little bit more anxiety about potentially losing their job or being laid off. With the assurance that they become full-time, they could potentially, maybe be a little bit happier with their current position. What we could also do is obviously look at the details of all those specific employees that I've just filtered down on and really drill down into one specific employee. So maybe we want to see Alexandra here. She has a very low score. Again, I click on her and now I'm really able to dig deeper into exactly her specific metrics, her specific explanatory factors, and her specific prescriptions. So that's one option when it comes to actually exposing predictions within a Tableau dashboard. Again, this is the bulk scoring option. So that means that we're running that prep builder tool to get this secondary data set, which gives us all the scores, explanations, and prescriptions, and then we expose that data on this Tableau dashboard. The thing to note here is that if, let's say, some data becomes different, so the data becomes stale, obviously you have to rerun that bulk score to get the new results and the new predictions and the new explanatory factors and so on, because obviously none of that will be updated in real time. So it's kind of a delay when we get to see all these different predictions coming from the API. So now that I focused in on this one aspect, I did want to quickly point out a secondary way of doing this, which is through a live API connection. And that's important because Tableau can connect to many different data sources, right? They have a lot of different connectors. Oftentimes you're also connecting to on-prem data, and that on-prem data could be constantly changing. And so with that kind of on-prem data that's constantly changing, the bulk scoring method might eventually again become stale. And so what we might want to do is create a live API connection so that when something updates on the live API connection, on the live database that you might have, you can then easily send that new data to the live API from Einstein predictions, get the actual score, explanatory factors, and prescriptions back as you're updating that source data. And the way to that we show this in this demo is, let me just run this real quick. And we've created a what if analysis panel. So this what if analysis panel is an ability to start creating some kind of real-time scenarios as we're talking to an employee. So let's say that we know that a specific employee we're just talking to now, they are impacted by COVID-19, hopefully not infected, but impacted. They have a low tenure, their job function is marketing, they have not met their deductible, and maybe currently we're just giving them this counseling employee benefit, which we thought would work, and they're also a contractor in the Northeast, and they have not gotten a promotion recently. We see that they have an incredibly low employee satisfaction score. So that's obviously, a way that we can easily start looking at a specific employee, a specific scenario that we've just generated. And as we're clicking around on these different parameters, we're constantly hitting that Einstein Discovery API to get those predictions back. We're also automatically able to look at the explanatory factors again, which are all coming back in real time. So as we're getting this data in real time, we're translating it to be able to expose it here, which again, we see, the different factors similar to what we saw earlier based on this specific scenario that we outlined. And then obviously, most importantly, the actions that we can take. So obviously here we see that giving someone that has this specific scenario, giving them the employee assistance benefit will really increase their employee satisfaction score, or another employee benefit could also help that. And then if we change their job to a full-time job, we can again increase this score by 7.4 points. So you'll see there's some other factors as well, but generally all of this is coming in real time. So as we change stuff on the parameter side, we automatically get the new updates. And so those are the two different ways that we're able to really communicate with that predictions API, that bulk scoring method and this live API method. So first, just to go back into some of the details of how this is done, with this live scoring method, I wanted to quickly show you all what it looks like to create, or at least display one of these types of extensions on the Tableau dashboard. So I'm just going to go into a clone of this dashboard in edit mode. And I have this little button. I'm just going to make sure to show it. And as you see here, I've already outlined some parameters. I've dragged them on to make sure that they're aligned correctly. But here you see there's an empty space. It does not have that, that specific place to be able to look at the actual predictions coming in from Einstein Discovery. And so what we can do here is we can drag a custom extension into our little panel here. And what's great about Tableau is that it's very customizable. So the way that I also talked about Prep Builder, where we can use Python or R to call out to external APIs, we can also actually create custom extensions, which also give us the ability to call out to external APIs and then be able to really customize the way that we display those results from those APIs on a Tableau dashboard. So we've created one of these extensions already. I've just downloaded it onto my computer. And these extensions are typically called Trex files. So you'll see that's the extension you'll see here. I'm just gonna click it. And the first thing it's gonna ask me to set this whole thing up is to log into Salesforce. So I'm just gonna authenticate. It logs into my instance, and that instance is really where I've trained this model around employee satisfaction scores. So now obviously I wanna make sure that I select the right prediction to be able to predict, what employee satisfaction score we have based on the scenario we outlined. I will select the actual model that I've already deployed, which I think is this one. And then we just have to map the fields, right? So we have those parameters that we've set, and we just want to make sure that they're mapped to the fields that we have within that Einstein Discovery story that I've created. So here I can select the different mappings. Let me just do that here real quick. And now that I've done that, voila, it's done. And we have the ability to have a live connection to our Einstein Predictions API through the parameters that I've just mapped to be sent to that API, and then getting these scores back as I'm clicking around. So that's kind of what it looks like to create one of these dashboards. Hopefully it does make sense overall. Some other things that I could show you also real quick is a little bit behind the general architecture of how all of this looks, the two different options. So I have some slides to kind of show you what that looks like. And then lastly, I'll also quickly show you how we deploy an Einstein Discovery model to make sure that it's externally available. Because typically what you might have done in the past is when you create an Einstein Discovery model, you deploy it to a specific object within Salesforce. But when you do that, you pick the object, you map the fields, and so on. In this case, we're not mapping to a specific object. Instead, we're just saying, let's deploy this model let it be available through the API. And then as you saw when I was clicking that drop down to figure out which prediction I want to hit, those are the models that I've deployed to that external system, that external mode, if you will. So first, let me just quickly show you some slides around the architecture of how this was built. And then lastly, I'll get into that Einstein Discovery piece. These are the two options that we talked about when it comes to actually using the Einstein Predictions API. This is the first option, which would be that live API connection. The one that was using that what if scenario is really what we're showing here. And generally, the way that this works now is that you can have any data connection, right? Because as that live API works, it's obviously sending that data in real time to the Einstein Prediction Services API. And to do that, the extension that we create is capturing any interactions that we might have within the Tableau dashboard. It's sending a certain set of data that you might have that's running that dashboard itself, right? That data gets sent to a web service. And that web service is required for any of these Tableau extensions because the ability to be able to write Python code or JavaScript code that communicates between external services, it needs a web service to run pretty much. So what we're doing here is we created a Python extension that is running on a Flask web service. And that is where all the data or all the interactions that you've had with the Tableau dashboard are being sent to. And then within that web service, there's a bunch of logic that goes on, and that eventually sends that data to the Predictions Services API, where then we get a JSON response back. Those predictions, explanations, and prescriptions are received from that Prediction Services API. That's where they're logically transformed to make sure that they're properly displayed on that actual extension and sent back to Tableau, where then within that dashboard now you're able to see the predictions, explanations, and prescriptions. The secondary method, which is the one that I actually talked about first on my dashboard, was that prep builder bulk scoring method. And this one is the one where you have that stale kind of data, but it's great also because first of all, there's no performance issues. You have that data stored within your Tableau dashboard. And second is that you can do a little bit more complex things with a data set that you've created with all these predictions, explanations, and prescriptions, because you can have the scores of your entire data set all in one place. With a live API, there's some bottlenecks you might hit when you're trying to send like 1 million records to be able to score them all at once with that API. So typically with that live API, you're trying to only score a limited amount of records. But with this Tableau prep builder method, you can really score as many as you want because you're just creating a secondary data set. And obviously there's much less limits on how many rows you could have in that kind of a data set. And so here what we're doing is we're loading, let's say in our example, we were loading all the employees that we have into the prep builder. Then we're using what we call TabPy server, which is another type of extension server that allows us to write Python code. And that TabPy server is taking in all those rows of the data that we just have around those employees, sending each one of those rows to our Einstein Prediction Services API, getting the scores, explanations, and prescriptions back to the TabPy server. And that TabPy server sends that back to Prep Builder, where now, again, we're creating that secondary data set within the Prep Builder and loading all of that data into Tableau. So now you have those two data sets, one with the original employees and then the secondary one, which can be linked with let's say an ID that has the 3 different columns of predictions, explanations, and prescriptions, and that's where we create that dashboard within Tableau. One other piece that I wanted to quickly talk about is how to deploy these Einstein Discovery models to that external API, right? So to be able to connect to an external system and to be able to, let's say, run Python code that connects to that API, what you have to do is you have to go into, let's say, a story that you've already created. So in this case, I've created an employee satisfaction story where I had a sample of employees along with their employee satisfaction scores, and I wanted to create a model that I could expose to that Tableau dashboard where I'm now predicting on my entire set of data to be able to predict those employee satisfaction scores. So I've created this Einstein Discovery story already. Let me just click into it. And now that I'm in this story, let's just say we've run through many iterations. We've modeled on our employees. We've discovered what are some of the big factors that lead to a low employee satisfaction score. For example, we see that when someone's deductible has met, they actually have a higher score, which makes sense. But now let's say that we've validated this, makes sense in the business context. We want to deploy it so that we can expose it within Tableau. What we need to do is go in and deploy this model here. And what you might be familiar with is obviously deploying this to an object within Salesforce. Here, that's where there's going to be one slight difference in what we do when we're doing this. So we're going to deploy this as a new model prediction. And here we can choose between connecting to a Salesforce object or deploying without connecting to a Salesforce object. So I'm going to select that first option. And then the rest is the same as before. Let's say we don't segment any data. We again have to select what are the actionable variables that we might want to expose in that prescription side of the panel. So employee benefit, maybe promotions would be another one, are the two here that I think I have. I can click review, and lastly it's deployed, and now we have a new model that we can expose through, or we've already exposed, and can hit through that API in external places like Tableau or anywhere else. And so that's pretty much it for the end-to-end, where you've created a model, you've deployed it, then you can either do that bulk scoring method, or you can do that live API, and you can eventually create an Tableau dashboard, which exposes the scores in different ways, whether it's a bulk scoring method or a live API connection.
All right, so yeah, that was awesome. And first thing I wanted to say, super jealous of the histogram. Ed, I don't know if you still watch my stuff, but if you do, please give me a histogram, maybe for Christmas. So I've really been wondering for like over a year now. The Tableau acquisition was announced the same day as the ribbon, the official opening of the Ohana floor in New York City. So it was last year on June 11th, and it's been a little over a year now. And so I actually thought it was going to, one, take a little bit longer before we saw anything surface, and two, I thought it was going to be pushing data sets back and forth. So is this kind of an extension of, well, where there's an API, there's a way? Are the possible, we do it not because we do it because we can, and it was more of like a low-hanging fruit than building integrations, or like what was the kind of the motive behind this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that we find that, Einstein Discovery can be very valuable even for users that are not within CRM, right? We give all the ability to create models very easily, to expose, easily understood explanations and prescriptions to anyone that's a business user or an analyst that might not be a data scientist. And so we want to make sure that people that are also using Tableau have that ability to be able to use the power of Einstein Discovery. And obviously, because we have everything as an API first type product, including Einstein Discovery, this just seems like a slam dunk and an easy way for us to be able to integrate these things together. Obviously now with a little bit of plumbing, and hopefully Safe Harbor very soon in the future, natively as well.
But then, again, you also comment that even users who aren't in CRM, and one struggle I always have with clients is no license, no dashboard. And they're like, oh, but people can share licenses, right? I'm like, yeah, that's called breach of contract. Oh, but we could use community licenses. No, well, you see the definition of a community user is not an internal employee. Oh, but what if we keep asking you again and again? No license, no dashboard. And so obviously that's going to apply to some extent. You're going to at least need some user that can go into Discovery and get the model configured, but you don't necessarily need to put your whole team on Salesforce. How does the licensing model work?
Yeah, so the way that we license it right now is that we would require everyone that has the ability to look at these predictions from Einstein Discovery, whether they're in Tableau or within CRM, they do require a license for Einstein Predictions is a SKU, which is one that includes Einstein Prediction Builder and Einstein Discovery.
Yeah, and as a consultant, I've always been taught, never talk about license costs. If you want to see the list price of those licenses, that is on Salesforce's website. But I will say a little birdie told me that AEs can be quite flexible around this particular license, and that it's, what you see on that site is not indicative. And you really, if you want to know what it's going to cost you out the door, that's a conversation you need to have with your AE. But then I understand also that limits regarding row caps are tied to licensure, the number of callouts. I think it's on a monthly period or possibly a daily period. So I guess, could you talk a little bit about the limits and also how this plays into scalability with the size of the data sets, and how this can influence whether you're choosing to bulk score nightly or score live?
Yeah, no, this is there's definitely a lot of considerations there overall. Like you said, when you are using, a data set with millions and millions of rows, and you're trying to predict on that with a live API, that might really hit your limits very quickly. And so then you definitely want to typically try to use that bulk scoring method more often, especially with these kinds of large data sets, especially when you're trying to aggregate scores on a very high level kind of thing, which is, the kind of like my example was showing. You typically want to do live scores maybe more on the type of scenario, or if you're just really trying to click on the granular specific employees here, for example, in this example. So I think the limit is 10,000 hits per hour or something like that, or per day. I honestly don't remember how many API calls you can do. The thing to note again is that because this handshake is going to happen natively soon enough, safe harbor, those limits will also not exist as nearly as restrictively as they do now, because there's going to be a little bit more integration there. But typically we find that when we are even showing these demos and recreating these demos, we don't usually have that issue with limits, mainly because we are focusing on that bulk scoring option, because we do want to use bigger data sets.
Yeah, and then through the magic of editing, even though as I sit here recording, I don't know what those limits are, not only do I know them now, but I'm going to pull them out from the side of the screen, and they are right here. Link in the description also. So then I'll wrap up with my last question. So obviously, again, there's always the debate of build versus buy, then versus now. There's a lot of times where, now we're seeing data set blending, and we're seeing a lot of really cool features, but then we still have the question of, should we still write SACL today to address use cases, or should we hold off? And Safe Harbor dictates, don't assume the future. But at the same time, when I see Data Prep 3.0 coming out, and I know there's a lot of problems that I'm solving with complex data flows versus, solving them, or, trying out Data Prep while it's still not fully solidified, there's always a balance to it. And the biggest question comes down to, how much is the lift to do it today and have it now, instead of waiting for what is described as for the plumbing to go in? So, could you talk in general about, let's say that we're going to spin this up, and we're going to spin up this connection across just a single model. What does our team look like, and what does our lift look like, and what is the skill set required?
Definitely, great question. And a lot of it is, like I showed you earlier with the web server, right? It's a little bit of coding. So typically you do need someone that's a little familiar with web technologies, whether it's Python or JavaScript, an ability to stand up another server, whether it's Flask or Node or something like that. So those are really the main components that are needed to be able to get this to work. Obviously, you still might need someone that's a business analyst, someone that's very familiar with the data, to actually create these models with an Einstein Discovery and to validate that they're actually accurate. But yeah, you do need that technical person as well to wire all of this up currently.
Yeah, and it's interesting how, from we don't even comment on what the effort to build the Tableau dashboard is, because as I'm looking at that dashboard, it's so foreign yet so familiar. And I've seen, our team internally, we have a robust BI practice with a lot of Tableau chops, and we've been doing a lot of collaboration lately of how are our two teams going to work together. And so, I've been trying to ramp up as much as I can on Tableau, and it's like, you know, it's almost like when I travel to Canada, and there's just enough of a subtle difference. The currency, the metric system, the courtesy, the Tim Hortons. But otherwise, it's like I'm home, you know, and
Right.
seeing Tableau
Right.
for me. And even at one point, you said Einstein, Tableau. And,
Yeah.
and like, so I don't think that the I guess my point is that the dashboard build itself is not going to be the heaviest piece of it. It's really going to be more around making sure you have a developer who's familiar with web services and a BA who can ramp up on discovery, which is fairly straightforward to do.
Exactly.
All right. So I think that's all we have for tonight. I want to thank Tomasz for coming out and showing us this awesome stuff. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, tell a friend, and as always, thanks for watching.